What's up, guys? It's Zach with Upstairs Studio, back at it again with another video. I hope that you guys are doing well. Today it is a brisk October morning and we are going to be discussing compression. So compression is sometimes kind of a difficult topic to just talk about. So obviously, being a video format, we're going to dive into a Reaper session. We're going to go over what it can sound like, what it does, and ways to apply it, and just sort of some compression basics. We're not going to be going into like the different types of compressors or things like that, or like we'll obviously go over some compressor plugins that I use in this session, but it's not like a total deep dive. This is kind of a introduction as to how you can use compression, what it means, what it does, and also what it's not. So as you can see here with my very fancy whiteboard that I have drawn on, we have a basic waveform here that is kind of showing what compression looks like. We have the threshold there. And again, we're gonna go more in depth of what it looks like. Hopefully that shows up in the frame. If not, don't worry. It's gonna make a lot more sense when you hear it. I'm gonna be explaining what some of the controls do and some benefits between a couple of the plugins that I'm going to use. One is stock, one is free, so basically stock. And we'll be able to kind of go over the pros and cons of both of those, as well as what compression is, or what the compression is doing in the mix. All right, so we are here in Reaper. Like I said, we're going to be talking about compression and what it does, how it's useful, why you need it, and just sort of show what it does instead of, because I feel like talking about it is just kind of difficult if you don't have like an auditorial, listen along or companion to it. So that's kind of what I am going to achieve here, because I think that it's a difficult concept to read about for me personally. And it's also difficult to just talk about unless you know what it sounds like, I suppose. So we're going to be messing around with the same little track, little 8 bars that I had recorded previously. This time we have a bass line on there. So the only difference with this right now is that I've left the EQ that we did last time, and then now obviously we're going to be talking about compression. So no compressors are on right now, but I'm going to go ahead and turn a compressor on for the drums, and that is going to be the 1175. This is a stock plugin with Reaper. There's nothing wrong with it. I've sometimes, depending on what instrument I'm applying it to, I'll get a little bit of like peaking and distortion. So it's something that I think you have to use, not sparingly necessarily, but a little, not with super high gain signals. I used it on some orchestral instruments, I think, and it was starting to like make some fuzz, and obviously that's not good, so I had to use a different one, which is fine. I'll show some of the compressors that I do use on a pretty regular basis, and I'll put links in the description for that. And I'm pretty sure all of them are free, because you can get really high quality plugins for literally $0. So it's why not do that? And then the other one that we're going to be using today is the TDR Kotelnikov. And that is a plugin from Tokyo Dawn Labs. Again, another free plugin. This one's awesome. I'll talk about that in a little bit, but I'm going to go ahead and just show you with what it sounds like with compression versus without. So this is with compression. So hopefully you're able to hear the difference, because it's pretty substantial, at least with my headphones on. It might be good to listen to this it might be good to listen to this with headphones, as some of the other nuances of the sound might get lost. But the biggest thing that we're going to hear with the drums especially is that there's a lot more smack with the snare, and there's a lot more sizzle with the cymbals. Like, it's pretty immediately obvious, especially if you solo it. When you are editing audio, you're going to want to generally listen to it as a whole. If there's some things that you're trying to hunt for and find and kind of surgically go in and remove, it's a good idea to solo. It's not bad to solo them, but you generally want to be mixing together. Like when you're making cookies, you're not, you know, beating the eggs and doing sugar and stuff like that separately. Like you mix them together. You got to do that. It's kind of the same idea, just you're not using an oven. Or whatever, that's stupid. Depending on the sound that you're going for, maybe that's great, maybe that's not, maybe it's a little too much. But basically what that compressor is doing is it's helping us to, you know, focus in on different parts of the sound and not make it, it's not so flat. It's like I said before, compressors help to focus the sound. It's not just lopping off the top end, chopping off the bottom end, and you just get whatever's left over in the middle. It's going to help you, you know, bring up the quiet parts or the quieter parts, and it's going to help to round off some of the harsher frequencies and to, again, just make it more focused, and it's going to make it sit better as in the mix overall. And then getting to the Kotelnikov plugin here. This one is, I really like this one because it has a delta button, and I'll show you what that does in just a second. So we'll solo the bass again, just so we can hear it by itself and hear what's going on. But it's really cool. So it's going to show you what is actually being compressed and what that sounds like. And that can be useful because maybe there's certain parts or certain frequencies that you want to come through in the mix as a whole. And this is going to help you find that. So obviously that doesn't sound great by itself because that's what's being, you know, rounded off of the top of the mix, or the track rather. So going to the parts of the compressor that we have here, we have the threshold, and we're just going to be going over like the main portions of it. I'm not going to go over every single knob and button here, but we have the threshold. And if you remember earlier from the one that I had on my whiteboard, that's the dotted line. That's essentially going to show us where we want the compressor to be activated, if that makes sense. So, and I like this again because it's a very visual plugin, so you can see sort of where your waveform is, and you can kind of adjust the dial according to that. So if we do it here, 50 decibels, that's where the compression is happening. So it's going to just be compressing everything that's above that, which that's way too much. At this point, you might as well be using a limiter. You want to be using it tastefully and, you know, kind of sparingly, a little like less is more. I actually kind of liked how it sounded when it was right at 12 o'clock. And then ratio, that's going to be how much compression is applied to whatever is above the threshold. So if we're turning it up to like this, 7:1, that's a pretty aggressive compression ratio, at least for this right now. Anything above that is like, just use a limiter because you're cutting off and compressing it so much that it's probably just going to make more sense for you to swap over to a limiter. We'll talk about that in another video. But what I generally use is like a 4:1 ratio. Let's see if we can find it. There we go. And then we have the makeup gain here. So makeup gain is to, you know, make up the gain that you lost, because sometimes when you're rounding it off, you're going to lose that intensity, lose that humanness, and that, you know, you're going to lose the magic of that performance sometimes. So it's good to have a makeup gain knob on there so you can lift that signal that you might have squashed a little bit too much. The other thing that's cool about this plugin is that it has a dry knob, or dry mix knob. So what we can do here is we have some parallel compression going. So this is just the compressed audio. There's no, think about it like almost like you have two tracks going at once. So one side, this isn't how it is actually effectively working, but it's a good way to sort of visualize it. So you have one track that is the compressed audio, and then you have another side that's the dry, uncompressed, as if it had no plugins on it. And that knob is essentially choosing how much of each of those you're using. So parallel compression, that's what that means. I like to have a pretty decent amount of the compressed audio because, again, you're going to get some of that performance and some of that magic in there. And then output gain, that's of course kind of doing the same thing. It's similar to turning up the volume on the actual track, but you're doing that with the plugin, obviously. It sort of helps with gain staging. You obviously don't want to do too much because then it's just kind of sounds distorted and not great, but still you can see even with the VU meter there, it's not peaking because we're using a compressor. So even though it sounds really gainy and distorted, which it is getting that way, but it's not going to exceed the threshold that we're setting and the ratio that we're setting. That's where the magic of the compressor is, because you can have really aggressive sounds, but it's not gonna peak out, it's not gonna, blow out your speakers. And now let's listen to it in the mix. Sounds pretty good. And so again, obviously, these things are going to be for, oh wait, we didn't even talk about the attack and release knobs. That's super important. So attack is going to be how quick your compressor actuates, or how quick it compresses. So if you have a slow attack time, it's going to be kind of like, so if this is your threshold, it's going to be kind of like, It's a fast one, then it's going to be much more punchy. So we can even see that in this gain reduction display here. So you can kind of see how quick it's moving. Not crazy fast, but and if we have this, it's barely moving because it's so slow that it's not even starting to really move. And same thing with the release stuff in the other direction. If you have slow release, it's gonna proceed slowly. So it's almost like turning up a knob really slow, turning down really slow. That's how you can kind of feel the attack of this. If you have fast attack, fast release, it's like, flipping it. It's like switching. And then similar with this 1175 compressor here from Reaper. It's a very similar function. It doesn't have the delta button, which is super nice to have, but you do have some of the other basic controls, the bare necessities, I suppose, and you can see the different frequencies or different ratios that you have set there, and instead of a dial, it's just with preset buttons, and they are, they do different things. So again, at this point, if you're doing like 12 or 20 or infinity, that's another thing. That's all. Just use a limiter at that point. And again, we'll talk about that in another video. But yeah, so that is kind of an explanation of compressor. I hope that this was helpful. I hope it answered more questions than it created. And of course, if you do have any questions, please let me know down in the comment section below. I am going to be including my free guide, Gift from Me to You, down in the description. And that's going to go over some of the stuff as well and help you to start your audio journey. Whether you're a musician, whether you're a voice actor, whether you are wanting to do a podcast, all this stuff is going to be relevant and helpful for you. So please check that out. It's going to be in the description, like I said, along with links to some of these free compressors. So with all that being said, I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks.
Tina, enough already. Come on.